Good morning. This is Northern Light for Wednesday, August 9th. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
This November, a number of local government positions in the North Country will have no candidates running to fill them. We hear from the outgoing town supervisor of Osceola in Lewis County, where a dozen positions don't have candidates.
Yeah, the only contested position in our town is a town clerk.
More from Lucy Grindon coming up.
Also, New York Senator Chuck Schumer visited Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital in Plattsburgh yesterday to push for a bill to tackle the fentanyl crisis.
If the House heeds the call, we will fight this horrible crisis with the toughest thing we can do to a foreign country economically, which is tough economic sanctions.
And we'll preview the summer concert tonight in Lake George. The electroacoustic duo Archive is debuting their full orchestra concerto at the Lake George Arts Project, and we have a preview coming up. All of that and more is just ahead on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Mountain Orthotic and Prosthetic Services, a full-service practice committed to providing care for patients of all ages with offices in Lake Placid, Plattsburgh, and Malone. Details and referrals at mountainonp.com. And Blue Seed Studios, a multidisciplinary arts center featuring classes for adults and youth, concerts, art exhibits, and more. BLUseedstudios.org.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. A New York judge has temporarily blocked the state from approving any new retail marijuana licenses. 4 military veterans sued the Office of Cannabis Management for prioritizing applicants with prior marijuana convictions. WSHU's Desiree Diorio has more.
The veterans say that the majority of over 400 conditional cannabis licenses issued so far have gone to applicants who have prior convictions for marijuana use. But that's only one of the 5 social equity groups that are supposed to receive special consideration. They say disabled veterans, distressed farmers, and minority and women-owned businesses are also supposed to get priority. In court documents, the veterans say they're losing out on valuable retail locations, while mostly those with prior marijuana convictions get their social equity applications approved. One of the veterans planned to open a location in Suffolk County, but couldn't get a license. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Desiree Diorio.
Some St. Lawrence County election inspectors say they have not been paid for working the June primary election. North Country Now reports the county has not said when the workers will receive their paychecks. In an email to inspectors, the county says to be paid, the 250 inspectors must now be set up as county employees instead of as vendors, as it has been in the past. The email also said access to the account meant to communicate with the election workers had been taken away, and the county had not been able to see emails from inspectors. The election inspectors oversee the polling locations throughout the county.
New York State Education Commissioner Betty Rosa met with staff from Governor Kathy Hochul's office and the New York City Department of Education Monday to discuss educating the influx of migrant children this fall. In a statement, the department says it's committed to collaborating with governments and education organizations to ensure the asylum seekers attend schools with the necessary resources, including English language instruction. Thousands of asylum seekers have arrived in New York City and some upstate communities. Many of them find themselves homeless, with the state trying to figure out how to change that. The state education department says although it does not control the emergency funding to respond to the spike in student population, relevant resources are already available for districts.
A military helicopter from Fort Drum made an unscheduled landing near the northbound lane on Interstate 81 Monday morning. WWNY reports 2 soldiers landed the Apache helicopter for precautionary maintenance while headed to Fort Polk in Louisiana. No injuries were reported, and the helicopter flew back to Fort Drum later Monday afternoon.
Both of New York's U.S. senators stopped in the North Country yesterday. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand announced in Lowville yesterday she's sponsoring new legislation that would put $50 billion towards rural economic development. Gillibrand says the bill would create the Rural Future Partnership Fund and would focus funds towards infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and small businesses. The grants would help fund long-term economic development projects with money awarded over the course of 5 years. Gillibrand says the bill also seeks to fight population loss by sending AmeriCorps volunteers to rural areas for services like childcare, health, and education.
And Senator Chuck Schumer was at a Plattsburgh hospital yesterday to promote a bill that aims to tackle the fentanyl crisis at its source. Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman reports.
Speaking in the Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital boardroom, Senator Chuck Schumer said Clinton County has seen firsthand the devastation fentanyl can have on a community. He said local law enforcement have seized 2,500 bags of the powerful drug this year.
In the past 2 years, Clinton County has seen 29 deaths from opioid overdoses. For a county like this, that's a heck of a lot.
According to the CDC, more than 2/3 of overdose deaths in 2022 involve synthetic opioids like fentanyl. Schumer says it's been hard to address fentanyl because it's relatively cheap and easy to make, is prevalent in other drugs, and comes from overseas.
Chinese companies, with the Chinese government just looking the other way and winking, sends the precursor chemicals that are made into fentanyl. They send them to Mexico. Mexico then, in its labs, these drug dealers and others, changes it into fentanyl and sends it across the border.
Schumer says the Senate has added a bill to the National Defense Authorization Act to try to tackle the problem by going after China and Mexico. The Fend Off Fentanyl Act would declare international fentanyl trafficking a national emergency. Schumer says it would also give President Joe Biden emergency powers to put sanctions on China and even Mexico if they don't help stop the flow of fentanyl. He says passage of the bill was broadly bipartisan, so it has a good chance of becoming law. But now it's up to the Republican-led House to take it up.
If the House heeds the call, we will fight this horrible crisis with the toughest thing we can do to a foreign country economically, which is tough economic sanctions.
Crystal Brandt says she doesn't think the government is doing enough to address addiction. She's a recovery coach with Champlain Valley Family Center who works at the hospital and one of the people who flanked Schumer during his remarks. Brandt says a big issue in this area is the lack of available beds for people in crisis.
To a person who's in a mental health crisis or an addiction crisis, and they want help right now and they can't get it, they go back out. And, they're most likely probably not going to come back in to ask for help again because of getting that no answer.
Brandt, who's been in recovery from addiction for more than 3 years, says there should be more conversations about addiction in government circles. She also says the focus for addressing fentanyl should be on the southern border, where much of it gets into the U.S.
I think they're doing a good job. I think it could be more prevalent, though, because fentanyl's killing the young generation.
Schumer says the NDAA and thus the Fend Off Fentanyl Act need to be passed by the end of the year. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio, Plattsburgh.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. Time is coming up on 9 minutes past 8. Good morning, I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Just ahead, pushing the boundaries of classical music tonight in Lake George. We'll hear from the electroacoustic duo Archive coming up in just a few minutes here on Northern Light.
Group out of Hoffmeister, New York called You Bred Raptors. You can hear more of their music on our website, ncpr.org/_. Northern Northern Light is supported by North Country Children's Museum, Potsdam, with hands-on and minds-on exhibits and programs for children 12 and under and their families. Open Wednesday to Sunday, 10 to 5. NorthCountryChildren'sMuseum.org. And St. Lawrence Health, offering My Care, a way for patients to access health information and stay connected to their care team. Registration is available at stlawrencehealthsystem.org.
This November, a dozen local elected positions in Lewis County will not have candidates running to fill them. That includes 3 town supervisor positions and 4 town clerk positions. Lucy Grindon reports.
Francis Yurden is the town supervisor of Osceola in the southern Tug Hill Plateau. Population 243. Yurden is 81 years old. He's been retired for 20 years, but he still volunteers as a firefighter, and he's been Osceola's town supervisor for a combined total of 10 years. First, he did the job for 6 years. Then he stopped. But 4 years later, he says Osceola needed him to take on the job again.
Because they couldn't get anybody to run. Nobody would get on the ballot. They kind of volunteered me. They recruited me back in.
This year, the town has the same problem. No one on the ballot for town supervisor. Yurden says there is someone planning to run as a write-in candidate. And only 2 people in Osceola are running for the 2 open positions on the town planning board.
Yeah, the only contested position in our town is the town clerk.
Yurden says working for the town is time-consuming.
You got to do the payroll. You got to do all the bills. You got to do the agenda for the town board meeting, run the town board meetings, and everything in between. You know, you're constantly getting phone calls. You got to make yourself available.
He says the town supervisor job takes him about 10 hours a week, and it pays just $8,000 a year, about minimum wage.
People just want to step back. They don't want to step up and take responsibility. They want somebody else to do it.
This is becoming a problem across the North Country. In addition to the 3 supervisor jobs and 4 clerk jobs in Lewis County, there are also positions like village trustee, town council, tax collector, all without candidates. There are also empty spots on the ballots in Jefferson and St. Lawrence counties. That means a write-in candidate could easily win one of those positions with a very small number of votes. And if no write-in candidate wins, then the County Board of Elections has to get involved. Ann Nortz is the commissioner in Lewis County.
If there is no clear candidate that wins for any elected office, our office would certify to that township as a failure to elect. At that time, the town would take it, and they may wish to appoint until the next general election.
There are a lot of possible reasons why people aren't stepping up to run for local government positions in the North Country. A dwindling population, an aging population, and the general nationwide decline in civic engagement. Public trust in government has decreased by about 50% since Yurden was a young man in the 60s, according to the Pew Research Center. Yurden says he thinks the lack of candidates has to do with economics.
Usually the husband and wife are both working because they have to survive. If you're doing that, you don't really want to spend much time working for the town or helping the town or doing something for the town. I think it's just the overall expense of living. Your gas prices, your taxes, everything overall, it's putting a way bigger burden on the families.
Yurden says he personally needs a break.
I want some time to myself. I'm 82 this fall. I want to do some other stuff. Jeez,
After Yurden leaves his post, he'll keep volunteering with the local Redfield Fire Department, which he says also needs more people. Lucy Grindon, North Country Public Radio.
All this week, we're featuring life and culture around upstate New York, thanks to our public radio colleagues around the state. Today, a cheesemonger in Syracuse, who's said to be among the best in the country. WRVO's Ava Pukech tells us why this curd nerd is better than the rest.
Sarah Samiel likes cheese more than you do. When I met her at her store, the Curd Nerd on James Street in Syracuse, she was wearing cheese earrings, and the walls of the shop were covered in cheese art and decor.
Cheese I do all the time. I am outside of work reading about cheese. I am waking up in the morning and reading some cheese news. I get cheese newsletters. I get cheese magazines. I read cheese books.
Samil discovered her love of cheese in college. Her background is in molecular biology, and she was studying to be a doctor when some of her classmates decided to start a cheese club.
Little did I know, cheese and biology are just the same thing. And I very quickly fell more in love with cheese than with medical school and sort of switched my career paths.
A cheesemonger is similar to a wine sommelier. Samil says they're the bridge between the cheese and the people. She's the winner of the Cheesemonger Invitational, an event where cheesemongers from across the country compete with written tests and skill tests.
There's a blind taste test where they give you a plate of 5 cheeses, and you have to identify them by name, country of origin, pasteurized or unpasteurized, milk type, and cheese type.
There's a timed cutting and wrapping section, getting 45 seconds to wrap different cuts of cheese with different techniques. An aroma competition, identifying concentrated aromas by scent.
Then we move on to a salesmanship round where you get 5 minutes. A judge gives you a prompt that could be anything. My prompt was, I recently got diagnosed with an allergy to dairy for cow proteins, and I want a cheese that I can keep in my fridge for about 2 weeks.
Samil recommended a Murcia Alvino, which is a goat milk cheese that's sat in wine and can last 2 weeks in a fridge. I gave her a simpler prompt. I typically buy grocery store brand cheddar. What would be a step up to something more fun and exciting? Her first suggestion, a tapping reeve.
It's going to have flavors of like clarified butter, and it's going to be very approachable. It's going to be not too far off cheddar, but definitely enough that you'll notice a difference.
It feels kind of light and like it has that cheddar feel to it, but not in like a super overwhelming sense.
Exactly. So since we like that one, we're going to take it one step farther. This is Hornbacher. This is a Swiss cheese that tastes like a loaded baked potato.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I liked the first one better than this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is aged Bloomsday. This is from Cato Corner out in Colchester, Connecticut. This is going to be, again, more similar to that tapping reeve. Another step up in flavor. You're going to get more of a cheddar note on this one rather than that clarified butter, but still not quite in that, like, acidic cheddar range.
Mm-hmm. It kind of felt like I was having a Goldilocks moment, finding the cheese that's just right for me. I think that might be the winner.
That one's going to be the winner. You got it. How much cheese are we looking for today?
As the champion cheesemonger, she wins some trips and earnings, in addition to a trophy that's proudly displayed in her shop. But the best prize, she says, is it'll open more doors for cheese in central New York. Samil says there were about 80 different types of cheese in her store, and she's hoping her new title will help bring more cheese into the curd nerd. In Syracuse, I'm Ava Pugac for North Country Public Radio.
You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up in just a minute, we'll push the boundaries of classical music at the show in Lake George tonight. We've got a preview coming up. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note. Great horned owls. Not all owls live in the deep woods. Many great horned owls make their homes in urban areas. Owls in the neighborhood coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
Partly to mostly sunny skies today. A chance of some scattered showers, mostly in the St. Lawrence Valley. with highs today upper 70s, low 80s, lows tonight near 60 with partly cloudy skies. A good chance of rain across the region tomorrow, about a 80% chance of rain, maybe a scattered thunderstorm on Thursday with highs near 80. And at this point, Friday, partly sunny skies, highs in the upper 60s, low 70s. The weekend, scattered rain both Saturday and Sunday with highs in the low 70s. Right now in Canton, sunshine, partly sunny skies, 63 degrees.
Audience goers to the summer concert tonight in Lake George will get a treat. The electroacoustic duo Archive is debuting a concerto tonight at the Lake George Arts Project. Archive is Jonathan Myron on violin and Philip Shigog on cello. They're classically trained Juilliard graduates who are trying to push the edge of classical music. Their name, Archive, comes from the Greek word meaning source for action. You can hear it. Myron and Shigog first got together at a party a few years ago and just started jamming together.
You have to realize that to find another classically trained string player from Juilliard who, one, knows how to improvise, and then two, wants to improvise is extremely uncommon. And so when we just started playing together, there was a natural connection there. But then beyond that was the way in which we were playing, the journey that we went on musically, and just how intuitive and easy it was, and how together we were creating a sound that was kind of unlike anything we'd heard before.
It's magic. It's magic, really. And I think life is full of moments like that that are pivotal. And so I think when you experience a moment like that, you have to capture it. As Philip said, it really was lightning in a bottle. And for both of us, it was like, well, what are we going to do with this now that we've experienced this? Is there really something here?
They started off with a bang. They composed their first piece, Aurora, for the Peace First Summit in New York City, and they say it was a powerful moment for them.
That first piece, actually, the context and the story in which we were writing, that was the year 2018, where the country was reeling from a series of gun violence tragedies. Parkland was one of the, right, not the only, but that was the name that possibly that rings in my memory. But we were attempting to communicate a story around that, potentially around the tragedy, processing grief, and then hopefully a journey through grief into one of kind of transcendence by the end of victory over that. And so that's the story of Aurora, and you can hear that in the aggressiveness, the mournfulness, and then the journey at the end.
They say they're inspired by socially minded musicians like Yo-Yo Ma and Nina Simone. There's a quote from Nina Simone that you've said is important to you, where she says, "An artist's duty is to reflect the times." Jonathan, as you think about your calling or your task, what do you see as your duty?
The music world is always evolving. Our cultures, our way of living is always evolving. And I think for both Philip and I, a big part of our training was within tradition. And I think we credit a lot of our artistry to that, a lot of our growth to that. But there's also so much more beyond that as well. That really is the goal, to just push to push the boundaries for what is possible and to inspire young people to dream big.
For me, I hope that's something that we can do. We can model that sort of optimism that's contrarian by the fact of, right, that something needs to change. We're hoping to push, as Jonathan was saying, but it's in service of, we believe that there's a hopeful future if we can do that together as artists, but also on a broader level as a society.
Arkai is debuting their full orchestra concerto Lament tonight in Lake George, and they say they want to hear how it impacts you.
Around the world, and no matter where we travel, no matter whether or not we actually speak the same verbal languages, we can still have a deep connection with audiences through the language of music. And so the audience really is everything for us. They really are. And the fact that we get to take audiences on a journey to hopefully transport them to somewhere more hopeful, somewhere more beautiful, really is the biggest gift for us.
Arkai is Jonathan Myron and Philip Shegog. They're performing tonight at the Lake George Arts Project. The show starts at 7:30.
And that's it for Northern Light on this Wednesday, August 9th.
Morning edition continues in just a couple of minutes. Then after that, it's the Marketplace Morning Report coming up between 8:51 and 9 o'clock. If you ever miss an episode of Northern Light, never fear. You can listen back to the archive any place you get your podcasts. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to our daily news roundup story of the day, where you'll hear the biggest stories in our region and get the latest on the day's news. You can also listen live to Story of the Day every weekday afternoon at 5:48. I'm Monica Sandreski.
I'm Todd Moe. Thanks so much for listening. Be well.